Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into something really interesting, ESG investing in Vietnam.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and we're going to be focusing on a specific fund called the United Vietnam ESG Equity Fund, or UVEEF for short.
Okay.
And get this, it's actually Vietnam's first and only open-ended fund that uses these ESG principles to pick stocks. Yeah, so we're going to try to figure out how they're aiming to make money while also, hopefully, doing some good in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Vietnam's economy, as you may or may not know, is absolutely exploding right now.
It's true. The fastest growth they've seen in 25 years. I mean, just in 2022 alone, their GDP grew by 8.02%.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. A lot of that has to do with, strong foreign investment and a stable currency, which always helps.
Right.
And so you have this really exciting market, and then you have this fund that's tapping into that energy, but with this whole ESG lens.
Yeah.
It's not just about riding the wave, it's about trying to do it responsibly.
So they're being picky about where that money goes. So tell me more about this fund. Who's actually running the show, and what are they hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so the fund is sub-managed by UOB Asset Management Vietnam. And these guys, they know their stuff. I mean, they were awarded Best Asset Management House in Asia back in 2023.
Wow.
Yeah, so the fund itself, it launched back in August 2021, and basically the goal is long-term capital appreciation.
Right.
So they're investing in Vietnamese companies, mainly ones listed on the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange.
Oh.
But here's where it gets kind of cool. They've got this proprietary ESG rating system that they use to pick the companies they invest in.
Proprietary, so like secret sauce?
Kinda, the exact details, they don't really share them publicly, but you can kind of get a sense of their approach by looking at what they, specifically exclude.
Okay.
For example, they won't touch anything related to coal.
Interesting.
Which, historically, coal has been a pretty big part of Vietnam's energy mix.
Right.
But, I mean, their decision to exclude it completely, it really says something about how seriously they're taking this whole environmental impact thing.
Absolutely. It's a bold move, especially for a fund operating in an emerging market.
Exactly. And it seems to be working.
How so?
Well, since they launched, their net asset value has actually increased by, get this, 5.5 times.
Wow, that's impressive.
As of March 2023, they're sitting at 102.61 million US dollars.
Wow.
They were even ranked among the top 10 stock funds in Vietnam in 2023.
Okay, so clearly this mystery rating system is working for them.
Right.
But can we at least try and guess, speculate about what kind of stuff might be going into that rating?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, based on what we know, it's probably a safe bet that they're looking at things like greenhouse gas emissions.
Makes sense.
How companies are using energies, water, how they're managing their waste.
Right, so the environmental stuff.
Yeah. And then on the social side, they're probably considering things like labor practices, how companies are engaging with the community, even things like board diversity,
So it's not just about the environment, it's about how they treat people too.
Exactly. And then there's governance. So they're likely assessing things like business ethics, transparency, how independent their board is, all that good stuff.
So it's a really holistic view.
Yeah.
Not just focusing on one little piece.
Definitely. And you have to imagine they're tailoring these metrics to fit different industries, right?
Of course.
Because, I mean, the ESG challenges for, say, a tech company are going to be totally different from a manufacturing company.
That's true.
And Vietnam has a pretty diverse range of industries, so that makes sense.
So, building this system and then maintaining it must be incredibly complex.
Oh, for sure. There must be a ton of research and analysis going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of what's making this fund so, interesting to people.
Right.
It's not just following a trend. They're actually trying to, figure out a whole new approach to investing.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's not just about Vietnam, really. It's part of this global shift we're seeing towards more sustainable investing. Green investment funds are supposed to just explode in Vietnam,
Wow.
And this fund is right at the forefront of that. It's attracting both domestic and foreign investors who want to see their money do more than just sit in a bank account.
They wanted to do some good.
Right.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're having a pretty big ripple effect.
They are, not just on the companies they're investing in, but on the whole investment scene in Vietnam.
And speaking of the investment scene, what are some of the challenges that asset managers are facing when it comes to implementing these ESG principles, especially in an emerging market like Vietnam?
Well, I mean, there are definitely some growing pains. Like one recent survey actually found that only 29% of Vietnamese companies felt like really confident in their board's ability to actually handle these ESG issues.
Right. Hmm. So it's kind of a disconnect. Like, you've got investors wanting ESG, but the companies themselves maybe aren't quite there yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, where do you even start?
Right.
And then you have this other hurdle, which is like the data. A lot of companies in Vietnam just aren't publishing the level of detail about their ESG practices that investors really need to know.
Oh, I see. So it's like a transparency issue.
Yeah. If there's no transparency, it makes it really hard for asset managers to really understand what they're investing in, right?
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
sounds like UVEEF is kind of navigating uncharted territory here.
In a way, yeah, but don't forget, they have UOB Asset Management behind them, which is huge. I
Right.
mean, those guys have been in the Asian market for over 35 years.
That's a lot of experience.
It is, and that really matters because they understand all the, like, unique challenges and opportunities that come with this region. It's not like just applying some global ESG
I
standard.
got to adapt.
Exactly. And UOB has this massive network all across Asia, so they can connect with companies and investors and then even regulators directly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it gives them a real edge.
For sure. But even with all that, what about the risks that are just like inherent to the Vietnamese market itself?
Right.
We know the economy is booming, but I mean, nothing's perfect, right? Are there any potential problems that investors should be thinking about?
Well, yeah, I mean, no market is without risk. Like, one thing that Vietnam has been dealing with is this property debt crisis.
Oh, right. I read something about that.
So back in 2022, the government really started cracking down on these corporate bonds because there were some concerns about illegal activities.
Oh,
And so the bond market basically froze up, which made it like really hard for companies to raise capital.
that sounds like it could have been a disaster.
Yeah, it was a bit of a wake-up call in terms of like transparency and governance in the corporate bond market. But the thing is, Vietnam has really strong economic fundamentals.
Okay.
Like, their currency is one of the most stable in all of Asia. In the last 5 years, it's barely even moved against the US dollar.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's got to be reassuring for investors who are worried about market volatility.
Totally. But it's important to remember that things happening globally, like, if there's a global recession or something, could definitely have an impact on Vietnam's performance. So, like, always do your research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how is UVE specifically handling risk management in this environment where things can change so quickly?
Well, they've got a pretty sophisticated approach. They combine like big picture stuff, macroeconomic analysis, with more like company specific research.
Okay.
They have this whole team of analysts who are constantly keeping an eye on like market trends, regulatory changes, all that.
So they're not just like setting it and forgetting it.
No way, it's very active management.
Got it.
And their ESG focus is a big part of that too, right?
Well, how's that?
Because, I mean, if you're investing in companies that already have strong ESG practices, you're kind of mitigating a lot of risks
Yeah.
automatically.
Makes sense.
Like companies that are good at managing their environmental impact, they're way less likely to get hit with like penalties or whatever. And companies with good corporate governance, they're less vulnerable to fraud and all that bad stuff.
Yeah, you're kind of getting ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
So it seems like they're striking a really good balance between going for that growth, but also managing the risks involved. So I'm curious, how does their portfolio actually reflect this? Like, what are some of the main areas they're focused on, and how do those choices line up with their whole ESG thing?
Okay, so they've got their portfolio spread across several key sectors, and they're all chosen based on like growth potential, but also how they fit into their ESG framework. As of March 2023, their biggest holding was actually in the financial sector.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was like 37.78% of their portfolio.
That makes sense considering how fast Vietnam's financial sector is growing. It's a pretty good sign of a healthy economy, right?
Totally. And within that sector, they're really interested in banks and fintech companies that are pushing Vietnam's digital economy forward.
So even within a sector, they're being selective. It's
Uh-huh.
not just any financial institution. It's ones that are doing things that align with their ESG goals.
Exactly. And that supports financial inclusion, which is a big part of their social impact goals.
Yeah, I see that. What else?
Another big one for them is industrials. So that's like manufacturing and processing companies. And that was about 14.72% of their portfolio back in March 2023.
Okay.
Vietnam has these really low labor costs, and it's becoming like a major global manufacturing hub. So it makes sense that they'd be interested in that sector.
Right, but how do they reconcile that with, like, the environmental and social impacts that are often associated with manufacturing?
Well, they're focusing on companies that have really strong environmental management systems in place. And they're also making sure those companies are treating their workers fairly.
So they're finding companies that are doing things differently, even within an industry that hasn't always had the best track record.
Exactly. And they're looking for companies that are like actively innovating, using new technologies to become more efficient and reduce their environmental impact. Like they're really betting on the leaders in sustainable manufacturing.
I like that. So what other sectors are they looking at?
Well, there's consumer staples.
Food and beverage, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Like food and beverage companies, personal care companies, all the stuff that caters to Vietnam's growing population and rising middle class.
That's a huge market.
It is, and that makes up about 10.28% of their portfolio.
So they're tapping into that rising consumer demand, but with that ESG twist.
Exactly. They want to see companies that are producing healthy, sustainable products, using eco-friendly packaging, supporting local communities. It's about aligning with a consumer base that's getting more and more conscious of like where their stuff comes from and how it impacts the world.
Total. What's the last sector?
The last one is materials, which was about 7.58% of their portfolio as of March 2023. They're focusing on construction and energy companies that are going to benefit from all the investment that Vietnam's making in infrastructure, especially renewable energy.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Vietnam's been making a big push towards clean energy, right?
Yeah, and it fits perfectly with UVEEF's principles, like supporting clean energy and helping combat climate change. It's a win-win.
Definitely. So with all this talk about, responsible investing and having a positive impact, who exactly is this fund for? Who are they trying to reach?
Well, it's definitely for people who are in it for the long haul, those who want to see their investments grow over time.
Sure. But, there are lots of funds that focus on growth. What makes this one different?
It's for people who believe that making money and doing good aren't mutually exclusive, They're specifically targeting people who are excited about Vietnam's growth story, but who also want to feel good about where their money is going.
People who want their investments to reflect their values.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're really tapping into this new generation of investors who are just way more socially conscious. They want transparency, they want companies to be accountable, and they want sustainability to be a core part of the business.
And UEF seems to be delivering on all of that.
Exactly. They're not just offering an investment, they're offering a vision for a more sustainable future.
I love it. So it sounds like they're really redefining what investing can be. It's super inspiring. But I'm curious about the bigger picture, How might UE's success be impacting the entire Vietnamese financial market?
Well, I think it's definitely having a big impact. Like UVEEF coming onto the scene and then doing so well, it sends a message, It shows the whole market that investors are really starting to care about this stuff.
That it's not just a niche thing anymore.
Right, exactly. And it also shows companies that if they want to attract investors, they got to step up their ESG game.
So it's kind of creating this positive feedback loop, right? The demand for ESG funds encourages companies to become more sustainable, which then attracts even more investors.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about like attracting investors either. We're seeing companies actually making real changes.
Oh, like what?
Well, they're putting out more detailed reports about their ESG performance. They're implementing actual sustainability initiatives, and they're even starting to proactively engage with investors on these ESG issues.
It's cool to see how one fund can have such a big impact.
It is. And it's not just happening in a vacuum, The government is also getting involved. They're really pushing this whole sustainable finance thing, and they're starting to include ESG considerations in their own economic development plans.
So it's a top-down and bottom-up approach. Everyone's on board.
Right. Which means it's a really good time for ESG investing in Vietnam. We're probably going to see a ton of new ESG-focused funds popping up, and more companies are going to start adopting sustainable practices.
It sounds like Vietnam can become a leader in this whole ESG space in Southeast Asia.
Totally. And UVEEF is leading the charge. Not only are they giving investors a chance to get in on Vietnam's growth story in a responsible way, but they're also setting an example for other fund managers in the region.
It's like they're proving that you can do well and do good at the same time.
Exactly. So this has been a super interesting deep dive. We've talked about Vietnam's economy, we've gotten into the nitty-gritty of ESG, and we've explored UVEEF's strategy and how it's impacting the Vietnamese investment landscape.
It's been a whirlwind.
It has.
But for our listener who's maybe still wondering, okay, But why should I care about this particular fund? What are the big takeaways?
Well, first of all, you're getting access to one of the most exciting economies in the world. I mean, Vietnam's growth is insane.
Right. But it's not just about growth. There are tons of funds out there that just chase returns no matter the cost.
Exactly. And that's where UVEEF is different. Their ESG commitment. It's not just some marketing thing. It's baked into everything they do.
They're actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Yep. And they're being super smart about it. They have the backing of UOB Asset Management, which is a huge plus. I mean, those guys know the Asian market inside and out.
They bring a lot of experience and stability to the table.
For sure. And most importantly, I think, they're pioneers. They're showing everyone else how it's done, and that's a big deal in an emerging market like Vietnam.
It's like they're creating a blueprint for the future of investing in Vietnam.
Exactly. So for investors who are looking for growth, who care about ESG, and who want a fund manager with a ton of experience, UVEEF is definitely worth checking out.
It's been amazing learning about UV and seeing how Vietnam is becoming a hub for sustainable investing. It makes you wonder, could Vietnam actually become the leader in ESG investing in Southeast Asia?
Oh, absolutely. They have everything they need. A booming economy, a government that's committed to sustainability, and a financial market that's embracing ESG. It's a pretty powerful combination.
It's a story we'll definitely be following closely, and we encourage you to do the same. If you're looking for an investment that aligns with your values and has the potential to make a real difference, UVEEF is a great place to start. And as always, we want to hear from you. What deep dives would you like us to take in future episodes? Let us know in the comments. And until then, keep exploring.